This happened about 2 years ago when I was living in a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. I had just adopted Rex, a German Shepherd mix from the local shelter. The staff told me he was around 3 years old and had been there for almost 8 months. Nobody wanted him because he was supposedly aggressive, but when I met him, he seemed gentle enough, maybe a bit skittish, but I figured that was normal for a rescue dog. Rex had this habit of sleeping right beside my bed, always positioned between me and the bedroom door. I thought it was cute at first, like he was protecting me. He never caused any trouble during the day, but I started noticing he would get restless around midnight, pacing around the apartment, checking windows. I assumed he was just adjusting to his new home. The apartment itself was nothing special. It's a ground floor unit in a building that housed maybe 12 families. Its thin walls, creaky floors, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors arguing or their TV shows late at night. My bedroom faced the parking lot, and there was a small hallway that led from the living room to the bedroom and bathroom. On the night this happened, I had gone to bed around 11:30. I remember because I had worked the next morning and was trying to keep a regular sleep schedule. Rex had settled into his usual spot on the floor, and everything seemed normal. I fell asleep pretty quickly. I was jolted awake by the deepest, most menacing growl I had ever heard. At first, in that foggy state between sleep and consciousness, I thought maybe I was dreaming. But then I heard it again, longer this time, and I realized it was coming from Rex. I checked my phone. 3:17 a.m. Rex was standing at the foot of my bed, his body rigid, facing the bedroom door. His hackles were raised, and that growl was continuous now, low and threatening. I had never seen him like this before. Even in the dim light from my phone screen, I could see his teeth bared. What scared me the most was that Rex wasn't looking at the door itself. He was looking up at the top of the door frame, like something was standing there, something tall. I whispered his name, but he didn't respond. He was completely focused on whatever he was seeing or sensing. My heart started pounding as I realized that if Rex was reacting this strongly, there had to be something actually there. I strained to listen for any sounds from the hallway. The apartment was old, and you could usually hear everything. Footsteps from upstairs, doors closing, pipes in the walls. But right now, it was completely silent, except for Rex's growling. Then I heard it, a very soft sound, like fabric brushing against the wall. It was so quiet, I almost missed it, but Rex's growling intensified, so I knew he heard it too. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, but I was too scared to actually get out of bed and look. Instead, I aimed the light toward the doorway from where I was lying. The hallway appeared empty, but Rex was still fixated on that spot above the door. The brushing sound came again, this time moving along the wall toward the living room. Rex finally broke his stance and started following the sound, his growl never stopping. He walked slowly toward the doorway, his movement deliberate and predatory. I forced myself to get up and follow him, keeping the phone light pointed ahead. When I reached the hallway, I could see into the living room, and that's when I saw the front door. It was slightly open. I know for certain I had locked that door before going to bed. I always check it twice, because living alone makes you paranoid about these things. But there it was, open just a crack, maybe 2 inches. It's not enough for someone to squeeze through, but enough for someone to look inside. Rex was now standing in the living room, still growling, but he was looking toward the kitchen area. I followed his gaze and nearly dropped my phone. The kitchen window was open too. This was a ground floor apartment, so anyone could have accessed that window from outside. I immediately called 911, but by the time the police arrived 20 minutes later, there was no sign that anyone had been inside. No footprints, nothing disturbed, no evidence of forced entry. The officers were polite, but clearly thought I was overreacting to a dog having a nightmare. But here's what convinced me something real had happened. The next morning, I found scratches on the outside of my kitchen window. Fresh scratches in the paint around the window frame, like someone had been trying to pry it open. And when I talked to my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, she mentioned that her dog had been barking uncontrollably around 3 in the morning. I moved out of that apartment 2 months later. Rex never had another episode like that, but I still trust his instincts completely. Dogs know things we don't, and that night, Rex was protecting me from something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. I used to drive long distances for work, traveling between small towns and rural areas to service equipment for a telecommunications company. The job required a lot of overnight driving because most of the maintenance had to be done when the systems weren't in heavy use. I actually preferred the night shifts because the roads were empty and I could make better time between locations. This particular trip was from my home base to a cell tower about 3 hours away. I had done this route dozens of times before, mostly during the day, but this was my first time making the drive at night. The route took me through some pretty isolated areas, long stretches of 2-lane highway with nothing but farmland and forest on either side. I left around 11 p.m., planning to reach the site by 2 in the morning, do the maintenance work, and drive back before dawn. My company truck was reliable, a newer model with good tires, and I had checked everything before leaving. The weather was clear, no rain or fog, perfect conditions for driving. About an hour and a half into the trip, I was driving through what I could only describe as absolute nowhere. No houses, no businesses, no streetlights. It's just my headlights cutting through the darkness and the occasional reflector marking the center line. I had my music playing quietly and was making good time. Hi. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of a tire blowing out. Hi. The truck pulled hard to the right, and I managed to safely pull over onto what passed for a shoulder. When I got out to assess the damage, I saw that my front passenger tire was completely shredded. Not just flat, but destroyed, like I had hit something sharp at high speed. Here's the weird part. I hadn't hit anything. I had been driving straight on smooth asphalt with no debris visible in my headlights. But somehow, the tire looked like it had been slashed. I called my company's roadside assistance, but the dispatcher told me it would be at least 2 hours before they could get someone out to my location. The nearest tow truck was 40 miles away and was currently on another call. She suggested I try to change the tire myself if I felt comfortable doing so. I had changed tires before, so I got my tools and spare from the truck bed. The spare was one of those temporary donuts, but it would get me to the nearest town where I could buy a proper replacement. As I was jacking up the truck, I kept hearing sounds from the woods on both sides of the road. Not animal sounds exactly, but like branches breaking and leaves rustling. At first, I thought it might be deer or other wildlife, but the sounds seemed too deliberate, too rhythmic. I was trying to focus on changing the tire, but the sounds were getting closer. I would hear them on my left, then a few minutes later on my right, like something was moving back and forth across the road behind me. When I finished installing the spare tire, I loaded my tools back into the truck as quickly as possible. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see fresh footprints in the soft dirt beside the road. Human footprints. And they led from the woods directly to where my truck was parked. I followed the prints with my light and saw that they circled my truck completely, then led back into the woods on the opposite side. Someone had been walking around my vehicle while I was changing the tire, staying just out of sight in the darkness. I got back in the truck immediately and started the engine. As I was pulling back onto the road, my headlights swept across the tree line, and I swear I saw a figure standing just inside the woods, watching me leave. It was too dark to make out any details, just a silhouette that seemed too tall and too still to be natural. I drove straight to the nearest 24-hour gas station, which was about 15 miles down the road. When I got there, I called the police and told them what had happened. They said they would send a patrol car to check the area, but I doubt they found anything. The next day, I had the destroyed tire examined by a mechanic. He confirmed that it looked like it had been deliberately cut, not damaged by road debris. Someone had slashed my tire and then waited in the woods for me to stop. I still do overnight driving for work, but I never take that route anymore. I go 20 miles out of my way to avoid that stretch of highway. And I always carry a better flashlight now, one powerful enough to light up the entire area around my truck if I ever have to stop again. I started working for a local pizza delivery place about 6 months ago. It's not glamorous work, but the night shift pays better because of tips and a shift differential. Most of our late night customers are pretty normal, college students, people working odd hours, insomniacs who get hungry at weird times. The money is actually decent if you're willing to work until 3 or 4 in the morning. Our delivery area covers both the main part of town and some of the more rural areas outside the city limits. The rural deliveries take longer, but people out there tend to tip better, probably because they know we're driving 15 or 20 minutes out of our way to bring them food. This particular delivery came in around 1:30 a.m. on a Tuesday night. It was a slow night, only a few orders all evening, so I was happy to get anything. The order was pretty standard, 2 large pizzas and some wings. Total came to about $45. The address was for a house I had never delivered to before, about 12 miles outside town on a road I wasn't familiar with. Plugged the address into my GPS and headed out. The drive took me through the usual suburban neighborhoods, then out onto country roads with houses spread far apart. After about 15 minutes, my GPS told me I was getting close to the destination. That's when things started to feel off. The road I was supposed to turn onto didn't have a street sign, it was just a gravel driveway that disappeared into dense woods. According to my GPS, this was definitely the right place, but I couldn't see any house, just trees. I drove slowly down the gravel driveway, my headlights barely penetrating the canopy of branches overhead. After maybe a quarter mile, the driveway opened into a small clearing, and I could see a house set back in the trees. It was an older farmhouse, 2 stories, with a few lights on downstairs. I parked near the front porch and grabbed the delivery bags. The house looked normal enough, maybe a little isolated, but some people prefer living away from neighbors. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I waited about 30 seconds and knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I could see lights on inside, and there was a car parked beside the house, so someone was definitely home. I tried calling the phone number from the order, but it went straight to voicemail. Okay, that's when I heard my name being called from somewhere behind me. I turned around and saw a man standing at the edge of the clearing, right where the woods started. He was maybe 50 feet away, just standing there motionless. I couldn't make out his features in the darkness, but he was definitely calling my name. How did he know my name? I hadn't introduced myself, and I wasn't wearing a name tag. The only way he could know would be from the phone order, but why was he standing in the woods instead of coming to the door? I called out that I had his pizza delivery, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, and I started to get an uneasy feeling about the whole situation. I decided to walk toward him to complete the delivery, figuring maybe he was doing yard work or something and hadn't heard me knock. But as I got closer, something felt very wrong. The man wasn't moving at all, not even shifting his weight or turning his head. He was unnaturally still. When I was about 20 feet away, I stopped and called out again. That's when he started walking toward me, but his movement was strange, too smooth and deliberate. Okay, and he still hadn't said anything since calling my name. I backed toward my car, keeping the pizza bags in my hands, but ready to drop them if I needed to run. The man kept walking toward me at the same steady pace, and as he got closer, I realized something that made my heart race. I couldn't see his face, even though there was enough light from my car's headlights and the house windows. His face was just darkness, like he was wearing something over it, or like the shadows weren't falling on him the same way they should. I got back to my car and put the pizzas on the hood, then called out one more time that I had his delivery and needed payment. The man stopped walking but didn't respond. He was maybe 15 feet away now, still completely motionless. That's when I noticed there were other figures standing in the woods behind him. I couldn't tell how many, but I could see several dark shapes among the trees, all perfectly still, all watching me. I grabbed the pizzas, threw them in my car, and drove out of there as fast as I could on that gravel driveway. When I got back to the restaurant, I told my manager what happened. He called the phone number from the order, but it was disconnected. We looked up the address later and found out that the house had been abandoned for over 3 years. The previous owners had moved away after some kind of family emergency, and the property had been sitting empty ever since. I quit that job 2 weeks later. I couldn't stop thinking about how that man knew my name and how there were other people hiding in those woods. I never found out who placed that order or how they got our restaurant's number. Sometimes I wonder if I had stayed longer, if I had walked closer to that man in the woods, what would have happened to me? But honestly, I don't want to know the answer to that question.